Welcome back to the Fish Tank, presented by Van Horn Law Group and CasaBella Design Group. Seth Levitt and the toughest podcaster. You know what? I'm going to change up the toughest post-game show host to ever work with Travis Wingfield and Seth Levitt. He is OJ McDuffie. And the guys are all back together again, Juice. This is like starting to feel familiar here.
Yeah, the gang's back, man. I'm telling you what, man. It's like, Seth, we remember like little young Travis Wingfield, what I mean? The fresh from, the Pacific West Coast, you know what I mean? And now look how our little buddy, no, I'm sorry, I don't mean it like that, but look how much he's grown, bro. Now we got him diving in a little bit here. I love it, brother.
Yeah. It's so funny that, like, sorry to introduce myself off the top right here, but like, no, it's so funny because I like, whenever we would have the discussion about age and I would like start saying something, you guys are like, oh, here we go again. I'm like, let me say what I have to say here. I do the exact same thing to the people that are 10 years younger than me in the content room. It's the exact same conversation. I'm like, okay, now I get it.
We call it a rite of passage, Travis. Yeah, so next thing you know, Bo and Joe are going to have you on out to pasture at the rate you're going.
I've already been on there. Be quiet, big Seth.
Oh, too good. Well, Travis Wingfield dives into the fish tank and, it's phase 4, Travis. So this is your second fish tank appearance. It's your first phase 4 appearance, hopefully not your last. And we're excited to talk about what's going on in camp. It's one of the fun things that we've added to the mix here. And, we just kind of want to know what's going on and who better to ask than you. We did have KFC. We had Kyle Krabs on earlier, so we want to talk to you about all that. But before we get into anything specifically related to training camp, you're in Chicago, and all this does is bring back memories of the great hashtag Free Wingfield moment from when was that 2021 when you were in Chicago. I have this memory of like the first time we ever did a post-game show together. None of us were together, and you were in that same hotel room in Chicago, and I'm in the studio going, this is pretty hard to do when we're all stepping all over each other. So like, you said you had a police escort. Was that specifically for you because the Bears PR staff is not wanting to let you in the place?
Well, they knew how important the fish tank appearance was, so get him back to the hotel quickly so we can get on there and do the podcast right away.
Is that what it was?
That had to be what it was. But yeah, I mean, the Free Wingfield thing came across my timeline again today, and that was like kind of like the mama we made it moment in a big, like in a way, because the way it got trending on Twitter that day, and with everyone being like, I'm in there firing off tweets, but I wasn't supposed to, at the indoor field house because there was like a lightning strike. They moved both teams, 180 players, into a one field indoor facility, and it's just chaos, and it's like play going left and right. You guys know how I'm at training camp. I'm just like that scene in Bruce Almighty when Jim Carrey's typing all the emails out because he's trying to reply to everyone's prayer. That's me trying to get Dolphins notes out, hit send tweet. And then I think it was Vera's like, Travis, you can't tweet right now. We're on a non-tweeting period. I'm like, oh shit. And I go and delete them all. and then I don't tweet the rest of the day because I'm like, I don't know the rules. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to wait for the podcast tonight. And everyone's like, where the hell are Wingfield's updates from camp? And that's when the hashtag Free Wingfield got coming out. And there was people put my face on like people being taken off with handcuffs behind their back and like so Free Wingfield from Hallis Hall. He's locked up in a jail somewhere.
So good.
Travis, I want to go back to that's amazing. I want to go back to the police escort real quick, Big Seth, because Travis, how many of those have you been in before?
That was the first one.
Man, are they amazing or what, bro?
It's really cool.
I'm gonna tell you what. Yeah, go ahead.
just seeing cars like pull over and it's like, that's for us. There's no emergency here. That's just us. And that's how you have to do it. Cause there's a lot of, you know how it goes. Like there's so many buses and so many people they have to get around and it's a long drive from where we are to where the practices are being held. So it's a cool experience. First one. And it made that drive a lot shorter. I can tell you that much.
Man, that was always one of the things, you talk about things that guys like myself miss. The police escort on the road is one of those things, man. It's like so much fun. Like going to New England when we got to go on the opposite side of the road because it's too congested on, because it's so hard to get in there. Those
What about Indy, Juice?
Indy with the police officer on the motorcycle, he stands up on it and rides with no hands. Yeah. You know what I mean? He's like driving. He's unbelievable. Like it's like dude,
put on a show, man. So those things are absolutely incredible, man. So I'm glad you got a chance to experience that, man, because, talk about things that guys like myself miss. I forgot. That's one of them right there, Travis. It's the best way to get to the stadium, that's for sure, when you have to head over there now. And I know you got that good parking pass, Juice, but it's still not the same as a police escort. My favorite police escort of all time, though, was in 97, Mexico City. Do you remember those dudes on the motorcycles?
Oh, yeah.
They were like waving the pistolas around, like they were getting people out of the way.
Yeah.
It was next level stuff. So, well, we can't wait to see what training camp, what this joint practice brings here for Travis Wingfield, because it sounds like it's always an adventure. I think, isn't this also missed the bus gate, you and JT in a lift trying to get to the game? Isn't that also Chicago?
Yeah, I guess it is. I also almost lost my credential after that too, so that's a whole other story on top of the JT story. But real quickly, I believe it was Joe Rose, as he is want to do, to go, oh, we're good, get out of here, go ahead, everyone's on the bus right now, and the only people that weren't there. And this is how I know for a fact that Joe Rose was wrong and me and JT were right. I'm not late to stuff. I make it a point to show up on time when I say I'm going to be somewhere. Now, I was late to this recording, but that's because we got stuck in traffic and I had no option but to be late to the recording.
With the escort, you're late? Big Seth. Even with the escort, he's late.
In fairness, he booked us for 8 p.m. So,
right, you're right. You're right.
I don't know what time zone or whatever it is, but we're recording the damn thing now. You did just drop a Drive Time episode 10 minutes before we recorded, so I couldn't even listen to it to get caught up on everything. But that's what our purpose is here now. So I'm just going to jump in. We're trying to think. There's so many different things to ask about. There's been a lot. I guess there are some camp battles. There's some questions. There are things that have Dolphins Twitter in like an uproar. And maybe I'll start with that. Do we need to be concerned about the cornerback position? Talk to us about the cornerback position. I know you are very fired up. Jack Jones, I think, is like maybe your Cater Kohu for me, right? So you're fired up about him, but tell us why we should not be pushing the panic button when it comes to the cornerback position.
Yeah, with Jack Jones, you guys can attest to the fact that I was sending you clips of him back in the summertime saying, like, we need this guy on the football team because of his physical skill set. And, there's a reason he was available. He's kind of copped to that and talking about how this is an opportunity he can't let slip through his hands. And to me, I've seen that on the practice field with him, busting his butt on special teams and splitting the guys trying to jam the gunner and getting down there, being the first one to the football and being so competitive in one-on-ones. Juice, you would hate going against this guy. You would match it, I think, but you would hate what he's bringing to the one-on-ones. You'd probably be like, hey, chill, young buck. Like, that's a little too much for me in these one-on-one drills.
Yeah,
you're in July, right? Like, it's a little early for that. Let's wait until September. But he's been competitive and feisty, and he finds the football like on those clips I showed you guys, a couple months back. So I think that when they signed him, I thought that's going to be one of the guys alongside Cater Kohu that's going to play for him. Then about 15 minutes later, Mike Hilton signing becomes announced. I'm like, that's probably the slot cornerback right there with Cater playing so well on the outside last year. And then a few minutes into practice, Cater goes down, and that whole equation gets flipped up on top of its head once again. And so now the Dolphins are kind of back in this position of like, who's going to step up? Who's going to be the young guy that rises to the challenge and puts himself in that position? And so far, that's been Storm Duck. And I love what Teron Armstead said about Storm Duck. I know it's another Seth Levitt favorite there.
For sure.
But the way he competes and the way I think this defense wants to play, and on the podcast that just dropped, Seth, I kind of talked about this with Coach Weave, and I asked him a question about how much does Minkah Fitzpatrick's background covering receivers and playing in the slot, as well as Ife Melifonwu being a college cornerback, how much does that kind of impact the way you can call your defense and protect the cornerback room a little bit, just with what you have at safety and, of course, the front seven and all the pressure they can provide? And he made it a point to talk about the guys they can bring down and match up. And he made it a point to talk about Ashton Davis, who, of course, has been injured since then, or was injured prior to that as well, but he'll be back at some point. So they have all these safeties that can come on the field and play three levels and play up in coverage. And I think about the way the middle linebackers can, get depth with Jordan Brooks and Willie Gay and what they've done all camp long, and then the pass rush up front. So I think the question about the cornerback position in particular is fair. I think the individuals on paper are incredibly unproven. They're going to let it play out and see what happens. And I know for a fact the Dolphins will not sit there and go into a season unhappy with what they have there. So if the guys rise to the challenge and they earn a role, they're going to be the guys out there. If not, they're going to explore the market. That's just how this team works. They're always turning over, stones, trying to find out what's out there. But in general, if that question is the biggest question on the team, I think the rest of the defense is really going to find a way to compensate for that. And the best coaches, the best teams in the world, when a guy's down with an injury, they can scheme around that for a couple of games. I think this defense is built to scheme around what they have at the cornerback position as it stands with the unproven nature, and there's still a chance they could find guys in that area that become proven.
Yeah, Travis, let's talk a little bit more about that defense. You talked about how some of the guys that we have, you talked about the front seven initially when you were talking there about what they can do and the pressure, having the guys back like Chubb and having, Phillips back and having Chop back in the second year. That's got to be key for protecting, I think, right? A secondary that maybe they're not bad, but just not as what people thought they would be at some point. So talk about that front seven a little bit. The linebacker position like is solid as hell, which I like. Guys that are coming back from the linebacker position, and then talk about a couple of the other guys on the outside, like a Storm Duck, like you talked about, or even Ethan Bonner. Talk a little bit more about that defense for us.
Yeah, I thought that one of the calling cards of the defense of the Dolphins' entire football team last year, guys, they were fourth in total defense. And Seth, you made this point about how I've talked about on the podcast a few times. How many critical guys were they down last year? I mean, without Phillips and Chubb alone, Emmanuel Ogbah was a guy that wasn't on the roster, and he came in and did a great job for what he was asked to do, and brought back in and went and got a good contract from the Jaguars based upon that performance. But that wasn't the expectation. And so without those guys, they're pulling Sieler out wide and Calais Campbell out wide to play edge, and they're super thin because of that on the interior, and they're finding a way to play good defense. And to me, that was a result of Weaver's ability to create different pressures with the way they set their looks up, but also playing sound zone coverage on the backside where it's really well taught to the rules in terms of how you pass off and how you communicate. And I think a second year of that is only going to get better. I think the vision that he has for the defense has been even more rounded out with that safety group we talked about. And then when they do get in those third and long situations, because now you do have Chubb and Phillips back, who are good pass rushers, by the way, but their run defense is elite. Both those guys are elite run defenders who are tough to move off the edge. And when you can do that, when you have Zach and Big Kenny G inside, and you've got Jordyn Brooks filling inside as well, good luck running the football consistently on this team. And so I think they're going to be in a lot of those third and long situations. And then you can get to those pressures, and then you can play that physical man coverage, because that's Storm Duck's game. That's Jack Jones's game to a certain extent. That's what Mike Hilton likes to do. You mentioned Ethan Bonner. He's feisty, man. He wants to go out there and challenge you and get in your face and make sure you win the rep, by earning it. So I think the mentality of the defense and the way they can mix the zone and man looks with that pressure up front and all they can do with the different games. McDaniel had a comment the other day in a press conference where he talked about one of the things that attracted him most to the Weavers defense was how they can make it complex for the offense, but it's not complex for them, because the verbiage and the language is simple for them to digest, but it allows them to be so flexible in the things they do that it is confusing for the protection scheme. So I think you're going to see a defense that does a good job confusing quarterbacks, and then the defensive backfield's ability to kind of mix their man and zone coverages is going to play off of that, and I think produce a pretty good defense this year.
Big Seth, Kenny G, when I think of Kenny G, who I think about, man, the great musician.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he was outstanding. But Travis probably doesn't know much about that because he was, he's as we talk about all the time, he's a youngin' in the game. So
yeah,
you know
who
Kenny G
is,
right? Right, Travis?
There was a South Park episode. We talked about South Park recently, Juice, where they parodied Kenny G. So I'm familiar with Kenny G.
There we go. There we go. All right.
Too funny. You mentioned Jordyn Brooks and Zach Sieler. And was it today that Jordyn Brooks was asked about him? And he basically said Zach Sieler is the face of what the Dolphins are trying to build, or what they're trying to accomplish, I think was the word that he used. And I assume that I didn't hear the whole context. I just saw kind of that quote, and I don't know if you were there when Jordyn spoke and said those things, but there's been a lot of talk about culture, right, this offseason, to the point where people are tired of hearing about the word culture. But you think about everything that Zach Sieler kind of stands for: small school, 7th round draft pick, practice squad cut, all of those things to becoming the player and the leader that he is. What do you think that means to hear a guy like Jordyn Brooks connect with Zach Sieler in that regard? And they've only played together for a year now. And Jordan's a leader in and of himself, but to hear those things, what do you think that means to him, for the younger guys to hear that? And just maybe kind of building upon that, there's been a lot of talk this offseason about what would happen with Zach Sieler. The business stuff is behind him now. And to his credit, football never stopped, but now it's all he needs to focus on. What does that mean for him, and then by extension the entire defense?
Yeah, when they announced the extension for Sieler, I tweeted that he's a perfect player, and by that I meant everything he does in the field, the availability, the toughness, the leadership, the way he handled that press conference. I know the consigliere here had to have loved that press conference with Zach Sieler when he was not signed yet and just said every single thing you want to hear from your leader and a captain of your football team. And then for Jordyn Brooks, you mentioned the comment that he said, and to me, that was revealing. But I also thought he had a little nugget in there that was even more revealing, talking about like how egoless Zach Sieler is. You talk about not having an ego. That's Jordyn Brooks' game to a T and his personality to a T. And we've heard people reference the ego with last year's team a little bit, and I think it was Bradley Chubb talking about the camaraderie or maybe it was Teron Armstead talking about not getting there last year where it was in 22 and 23. And I think when you start rewarding these guys that do it that right way, it can kind of permeate throughout your football team and send the right message about how you go about things and how you get rewarded. And this is what is going to make us better as a team, not just you as the individual. And, I think the world of Jordyn Brooks and Zach Sieler as players, but man, the way they've helped bring guys along with them, like we had a mic'd up with Jordyn the other day and he talked about, it just showed him like going through the individual portion of practice and stretch. And he was talking about like, I know it was a tough day yesterday and it's hot today. And like, it's a tough one. We're going to have to grind our way through, but like, make sure you're on top of all these important details. And Patrick Paul is a guy that has gone out there and just like consistently repped the same things over and over. Cause that's the path to greatness, right? Is you just keep repping until it's second nature. And that's like, just been the mode of this football team. We talk about, Kenny G and Jonas Avai are racing to the building, seeing who can get there first. Jonah and Patrick Paul, like working out every single day together, trying to build that chemistry. It's McDaniel talked about this back in March with the desire to build the culture of the team through the draft and basically just getting more youthful because those guys are naturally hungry, right? They haven't had the accolades and the big contracts and they're ready to prove themselves. And you build that around a quarterback who's really kind of found his footing as the ultimate leader and the CEO of the football team. Not that it wasn't there before, but like this year, you can really see it as plain as day. And you start surrounding him with young guys that have that same passion and drive and hunger. And all of a sudden, you're going to get everyone pulling the rope in the same direction. Whereas last year probably wasn't that way for most of the year, especially with the injury to Tua coming in and out and, the quarterback play being up and down. But I think this year they've really focused on the right types of things in terms of who they go out and they get and who they go out and extend and who they put in leadership positions. And I think that's kind of what Jordyn Brooks is talking about there with Zach Sieler and the effect that can have on the rest of the team, from a production standpoint, but also just how guys are in the locker room.
Yeah. I mean, it's what I heard for sure. But then when I hear you talk about this team, there's a lot to be excited about. If I just listen to Travis Wingfield, and it is kind of a lot of what I just listened to, but if I just listen to Travis Wingfield in Drive Time and I'm hearing this, I'm like, wow, this football team's ready to roll. And then I open up the USA Today and they predict the Dolphins to go 5-12. So there seems to be these very strong polarizing opinions as it relates to this football team. What do you think is leading to, is it that you're just watching more than other people are seeing from the outside? Or are there things that people are legitimately and fairly concerned about that could have things go wrong in a hurry?
Well, I would cop originally to the fact that I do tend to see things through an optimistic lens. There's no doubt about that. I don't know why you watch sports if you're going to do it otherwise. I see people on Twitter that are just miserable all the time. I'm like, go find something else to do, man. Like, it's not for you. If it's just making you mad all the time, go find enjoyment in your life. But, I digress on that, right? But that's also always how I've covered the team too. Like, I remember the 2019 season. I was like, guys, I'm not going to sit here and talk about, a player that's getting run over because he's not going to be here in the long term and that's not worth bogging down over. So like trying to find what it looks like in terms of what they want the team to be and how they want to build it. And I think the disconnect comes from like, Tyreek's comments after the Jets game was tough, right? We went through that on the post game show and tried to sort what all that meant out and how it was going to play out for the future of the franchise. And I think people probably hang on to that a little bit and be like, oh, it's broken. There's no way it's going to work. And McDaniel has this reputation as a guy that's like quirky, but not a great leader and all these things. And they're probably going to just assume that that's what's going to be going forward. And then, they go out and they sign Darren Waller and trade for Darren Waller. And I see these comments about like, oh, this team isn't serious about getting physical. And I'm like, what the hell offseason were you watching? Because every move they made was everything you've talked negatively about this team for the last 3 years in terms of they can't push people off the football in December in cold weather. They can't run the ball well enough. They're not tough enough. Like, they haven't invested a free agent contract in a player like James Daniels on the interior ever in this regime. They traded a 3rd-round draft pick to use their 2nd-round pick and both day 2 picks to go up and get Jonas Savait-Inaya. That doesn't happen in this system very often either. They, Patrick Paul looks the part. They go out and they get a badass Y tight end and Pharaoh Brown to move guys off the football. Nick Westbrook-Akine is the antithesis of Odell Beckham in terms of their skill sets and how
that word,
it's a big word like mayonnaise.
There we go.
I was impressed with the word, but I was more impressed with the way he's talking about OBJ, because when he was sending me clips of his Baltimore tape there, I was sick to my stomach.
The tape was good. The result was not. We'll go ahead and put it that way. And sometimes you miss. And I'll definitely have misses this year.
Yeah.
But it's a different type of player. It's a guy that can insert, and it's not just like go kick out, the corner or go, fit the safety 20 yards downfield. Like they would insert Westbrook-Akine in the B gap and runs last year. So, and then they go out and they use their first 2 picks on interior, defense and offensive linemen. Like they have fortified the trenches. They're going to get back to running the football at a much better rate than they did last year. And I just think that with that all together, and I don't know, like perhaps I've reached this point with Tua where it's like, I just know what he is now. Like I know he's a really good quarterback and there's certain things he still has to prove. And I think there's a lot of folks that aren't there in that regard, but he's 38-24 as a starter. And he's done that with various coaches and OCs and receivers. And it's been, it's gotten better for him in terms of the surrounding cast the last couple of years, but he won before that as well. So I think that when Tua's in there, and if they have this run game, and I believe in this defense with the first time having the same coordinator and a guy that I think very highly of, an Anthony Weaver, for the first time since, Josh Boyer was here, I just think that they're built to be the same explosive attack they've been in the past, but they also have fixed some of the shortcomings that cost them in short yardage, in the red zone, at the end of games, in bad weather down the stretch against the tougher teams. And I think that they're going to continue beating up on the teams that are worse than them. And I think they have a better chance to compete against the good teams. And so I don't think anything's changed based on expectations of the last few years. That's just how I see it.
Yeah, Travis, and you're not wrong, man. I get tired. If they call you a homer, I'm probably a bigger homer when it comes to the situation. But I see the team the same way. I see this team the same way you do. I see that we've changed and we've addressed some of the things that that we need to address in terms of this team and this football team. Look, what quarterback has gotten it done all by himself? They're zero. There have been 0 quarterbacks that have gotten it done all by themselves without having the help from players that you go and you fix these holes. You start putting and fixing what's been wrong. You talk about our physicality. Now we're a physical team, I think. We're a much more physical team. Now the only thing is, do we commit to 3rd and 1 running, a Madison? Do we run an Ollie Gordon? Do we listen to Tyreek and say that, the Achane is not the guy to be in there on 3rd and short? I mean, sometimes I listen to Tyreek, sometimes I don't.
Might be the only time.
That might be the only time I listen to what he's got to talk about. But also, though, you've got a defense, I think, that's going to be super physical, and I think that's important because you're going to get hit in the mouth. Are we willing to hit back? And I think this is a team that's been built to hit people back in the mouth, man, because no matter what it is, defense, run game, those things that we talk about, it's a cliche, they travel, especially in weather. But when we've got the guys we're talking about right here on this roster, I think we've got the build that we want to have as long as we're committed to being physical on both sides of the ball. And I know we've got them. Hell, Minka just came from Pittsburgh. He played in inclement weather a lot, I'm sure. You know what I mean? I grew up in that area. So we got guys that are down here that should be able to go out there and play physical style of football, because that's what it's all about. So everything cannot, I'm getting back to my point, everything cannot be on Tua's shoulders to make us be a successful team. We had the greatest quarterback in the game, Dan Marino, but we didn't have a defense at one point. We didn't have a run game at one point. We didn't have this at one point, and we didn't win anything. So anybody that thinks that you can just get it done, if your quarterback plays elite, hell, I hate to mention his name in this podcast, but Josh Allen plays elite football, but what have they done? Lamar Jackson plays elite football, but what have they done? It's just part of the game, man. But I think putting the right parts around, I think it helps us out a lot. And I think that's going to be the key to us being a successful football team.
And to your point, Juice, sorry if you had something to come in with here, Seth.
No, I'm done. I'm done. I want to follow up on all I had to say right there.
He was apologizing to me.
You mentioned Josh Allen. Like, if I would I would really advise Dolphins fans to go back and watch that game in Buffalo last year, because that was when Austin got hurt in the last play of that game, and they would lose Ingold later on. And the offensive line kind of became a patchwork, mixing guys up in and out of the lineup. But they ran the ball so damn well in that game. And what did Tua do in that game? He was 25 for 28. One of those passes was a spike. One of those was a drop pass. So he really had one true incompletion on 28 throws. When Tua gets a running game, 2023 happens and he leads the league in passing yards, and he's efficient, and he's got 29 touchdown passes, and he's getting 25 touchdowns volts from him from the running backs down there. So like, I think if this team can get back to running the football, and I think the personnel changes are there and part of that, but I would go a step further, because that's what we see on paper. And this is a coaching point that Seth Levitt has given me about my own evaluations of football. It's more than the tape and more than what you see on the tape. And when I'm watching these practices, I think there's more intentionality. I think they're more physical. I think there's more reps being done. I think they're putting themselves in harder situations to kind of get themselves ready and tough for the season. So when McDaniel went into this offseason, there was questions about what his future was in terms of who he was going to be as a head coach. And from what I've seen, and it's August, it's way too early to make any proclamations, but all I can do is talk about what I've seen up until today. Mm-hmm. And what I've seen up until today is a hungry coach who has a sense of urgency and has adjusted the way he does things to attack the weaknesses or perceived weaknesses in his football team. And I think that this is a smart dude that is obviously an offensive mastermind, but I think that he's so smart in the way he's kind of learned his ability to manage people and kind of, be a manager, that I'm excited to see what he can do, because we've seen so many coaches in this league, start strong, fizzle out, and get a second chance somewhere else and be great there. And I kind of want to see if he can, learn from his mistakes and just continue to grow and become a really good head coach like we thought he was right away. I think that's within his window of capabilities. And I'm
not at all. More than just kind of, right? I think you really want to see that.
Of course I do. He was the guy I was texting you guys about, as a possible OC candidate back in like 2020. But right. I think what I've seen from him is I think a real sense of urgency, and I think it shows in press conferences and the way he talks in press conferences too. So I'm really excited to see what that looks like. I think there's an intentionality there, and we'll find out the results, come September.
I will say this, as you talk about, physical practices and what have you. I made the joke about Bo and Joe earlier, but I watched something that they recorded after yesterday's practice, and they were surprised to see guys in pads, in that practice there. So I thought that when you have those guys right. saying, "Oh wow," he raised an eyebrow. They're out here hitting, and they were surprised. I think that certainly is a big change from maybe the perspective they had the previous year. So I do hope it translates to something on the field that we felt would be lacking. But speaking of the quarterbacks, and you said you know in your heart of hearts who Tua is, and there is criticism, and some may or may not be fair, but I think one of the concerns, I won't call it criticism, but one of the concerns that absolutely is fair is availability, right? He needs to be available, I think, for this team to be successful. With that, I'd love to talk about the two guys that are on the roster that are behind him. And, you've got Zach Wilson, who was rated very, very highly coming out of college and went to the Jets. And we love that he didn't work out for the Jets for a lot of different reasons. Right. But so Zach Wilson's here, and then you've got another, here we go again. We got a 7th round rookie quarterback. But apparently Mighty Quinn has been looking pretty good in camp lately. What have you seen? What a long ass way to get to this question. Yeah. What have you seen from? I almost
went to the bathroom on that one, Big Seth. Like I had a little time.
To get up and leave. Go ahead, Juice. I got it from here. What have you seen from the two backup quarterbacks? And I know people are calling it a battle. I don't see a world. I feel like Zach Wilson would have to be completely awful or injured to not start the season as the number 2 quarterback. But what have you seen from these two guys? And do you think it's another situation where we're going to have 3 quarterbacks on the 53 come week 1?
Yeah, longest question asker, longest answer here. So Juice, go ahead and go get a drink.
Better be a long answer than a long question answer. I want to be editing the shit out of this thing.
Well, you'll do a great job with that as he slams the Mountain Dew back. I still owe you, I think, 6 of those, by the way. So those are coming up here pretty soon, my friend.
Yeah, buddy.
So yeah, with the quarterbacks, you mentioned, Sieler was a previous guy that was in that 7th round developmental prospect. I kind of feel like, and this is just thinking out loud, I kind of feel like him getting thrust into the situation that he was that rookie season was the worst thing that could have happened to him, because he came from an offense, and I made this point several times, where they were holding up, cue cards that had like SpongeBob, Pop-Tarts, and Nevada on it as his play calls. And then you get here and, it's like 25 words that you have to rattle off and get all these protections and shifts and adjustments and route concepts and all the things that you have to do for an NFL offense to operate. And with Quinn Ewers, he comes from an offense that's very similar to what the Dolphins run from Steve Sarkisian. And that was kind of one of the big sticking points for, McDaniel and co signing off on him in the 7th round. I thought Ewers' Texas tape, there was games where like he saw it and ripped it and played really damn good football. And there was games where it looked like it was way too much for him. And so I was kind of dubious on him as a prospect because I didn't know who the real Quinn Ewers was in terms of what he looked like against those certain looks. And this is kind of a grain of salt because he is going up against, typically the 3s and 4s every single day, but it doesn't look like it's too much for him. He's playing really well on time and rhythm. And you guys know that's my favorite trait from a quarterback. I think it's why Tua's ceiling continues to progress from here because I think the league is going more towards this, too high defense and you have to play well within a constricted box. And that's where Tua shines the most, yada, yada, yada. But for Quinn Ewers, he's had some moments against this defense, which again, it's another thing that I think the old iron sharpens iron thing plays in here is they have all these pressures and things they can do to kind of make things look muddy on you. And it's good for these quarterbacks. But what I want to see is how they do in a joint practice situation tomorrow or Friday, whenever this podcast comes out, or how they do in a preseason game against the Bears or against the Jags, against the Lions, because then we're going to get these non-scripted looks where it's not like, okay, well, maybe they knew what they were doing there. Maybe they knew it was the good look for this particular play or a look that was tough. They're going to try to run it anyways. It's going to be more of a game situation that gives us a better feel for how they are processing all the color that flashes on an NFL snap. And with Zach Wilson, again, no mystery that I thought the Jets tape was a tough watch, right? Like we talked about it. We hate watch it together. We enjoyed it. But then he goes to Denver and Sean Payton has all these great things to say about him. And I'm like, well, Sean Payton knows what the hell he's doing. And I never felt that Zach had quality coaching with the Jets. And I thought that some of the stuff that made him this, number 2 prospect in the draft was only played at the college level where he would kind of, sprint backwards away from the play and run around and make these great throws. And he's got all the physical skills in the world, but you can't do that in the NFL. Look at last year's first pick, Caleb Williams. He did that last year. It was bad. It was hard to watch that Bears offense last year. So for those 2 guys behind Tua, and I think you're right, Seth, I think it's Zach and then Ewers. In fact, coach said as much recently. I think it would behoove Ewers to just get reps and kind of sit back on scout team and just see things progress from there. And hopefully we never see Zach either. But if he does get out there, I'm really curious to see how he plays with the rhythm of the passing game, because there's been times where I've liked it. There's been times where it's gotten too much for him, but that's been the case for Tua and Ewers as well. So I'm not going to just pinpoint that on Zach Wilson. I think it's a point of emphasis this camp is to give these quarterbacks the tough looks and be like, we got to play fast, guys, because that's how it's going to be come Sunday. So I think they're putting them through the ringer right now. And I'll tell you this, I've been at every practice since 2019. It hasn't been this close in terms of what it's looked like from a backup quarterback in practice. Skyler's first couple of years were pretty good at practice, but it wasn't this good from Zach and Quinn. And I think that is a good starting point. And I'm curious to see, where it can grow from here, because it has to get better, obviously, but it's a great starting point.
Not even the Skyler and White Mike battles, like that wasn't as close.
White Mike, damn. What if I'd have said that, it'd been a problem. Here we go. We're going to talk quarterbacks, though, bro. We got to talk about the most important position on the football field. It's wide receiver, Travis, as we all know. 11 of them. we need 11 of them out there, as we always talk about. But we already know about Waddle. We already know about Tyreek. Talk about some of the other guys that and Watson, Malik. You told me about Malik before I even got a chance to see Malik, and obviously his second year in, it's going to be amazing for him. Talk about some of the other guys that are going to be impact guys that can help this team out. Giving guys opportunities, that have been on this roster before. How do you feel about my group this year going forward?
Well, I think Devon Achane has a say in that, like he did last year, because I continue to marvel at what he can do on a football field in terms of running the ball between the tackles or off tackle and then going out and playing receiver and catching passes there. So I always make sure to mention him with the group, because I feel like between him, Reek, and Waddle, you have one of the best triumvirates in the entire league in terms of guys that can, put the ball in the paint. Beyond that, I mentioned Westbrook Akine. He just has and I you know what? I'm going to go back to KFC, because I remember on the podcast that you guys had him on, he talked about my love for smallish speed receivers.
Oh, man, he's in my playbook, Juice. I was going to bring that up. He's in my playbook. Get out of my damn playbook.
Kyle fucking nailed that. It was so good. I loved it. It was on point. and perfect. But I try to adapt and grow my ability as an evaluator and amateur scout. And one of the things I like is how they've given the room and given Tua some options in terms of bigger bodies. And I think Nick Westbrook-Akine was a guy that 32 catches last year, 9 touchdowns. That's an insane rate of touch. All he does catch touchdowns, right? So I think that his ability to kind of be a big body in the red zone, but also I think he can do some of the stuff that Jonnu Smith did, where it's like, look vertical to Tariq and Waddle or the intermediate to Tariq and Waddle. If it's not there, let's go ahead and find what's underneath, and we'll get underneath these linebackers, and we can catch it and run it after the fact. I think his ability to kind of hook up and post up in those, short 5, hook zone, curl flat zone, just show the quarterback his numbers and get a quick catch and stay ahead of the chains is going to be very valuable. And then you mentioned Malik Washington. I just think the world of his game in short spaces and what he can do in the screen game as a blocker, on the screen game, or a receiver in the screen game. And then the guy that has really jumped out to me in camp so far has been D. Eskridge. And I asked him today about this because we had him after practice. Like, he got here on September 1st, whatever it was last year, very early on at the end of camp. And he was in that Seahawks game, like playing elevated reps and getting and catching passes and making plays. And I thought to myself, like, we've seen a lot of young receivers come through here, and it's tough for them, right? I mean, Tyreek just told you it's been 3 years. He still doesn't know what he's doing out there, which take it seriously or not.
Yeah, just let's not go there.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about it.
Let's not go there.
My point is, it's tough, and they ask a lot of those receivers.
Don't use that to make any point.
in terms of what they have to do. And for him to be able to get out there and make an impact right away tells me that he understands what's asked of him and what he has to go about and do. And I think that's shown up big here in his second year of training camp with first year with the Miami Dolphins in training camp. He's made a bunch of plays, made a bunch of tough catches. He seems to always come down with it in contested areas. A little bit of that OJ McDuffie to him in that way. So I think there's depth. I think there's a well-rounded quality of the room. And to bring somebody else from a different position group in to put a bow on it, I'm so fascinated by what Darren Waller might be, because I think if he can give you anything close to what he was previously, he's something that Tua hasn't really had since like Devontae Parker in that skill set. And I think he's more explosive than Devontae Parker was, even though Parker was a receiver and Waller's a tight end. But the ability to kind of play that backside X juice, or even like a backside isolated Y, where you've got Reek and Waddle taking coverage off, or running crossers that removes the coverage, for him to be able to just like throw a back shoulder high ball, like Waller's come down with those like 100 times in his career. And I'm curious to see how that functions with an offense that hasn't really utilized that before. If Waller is the same guy, if all that stuff checks out, it makes for a really, really difficult dynamic they haven't had in the offense. But there's a lot of
get him on the field though, Travis. We got to get him. We got to get one practice in. Let's get a practice in before he starts catching his 101st back shoulder catch. Okay. Although I thought it was interesting what Mike McDaniel said when he was asked about him the other day, and he's like, the way he answered the question made it seem like that Waller was getting closer, but he was like, do you want a guy's first practice in 2 years, whatever it's been, to be a joint practice? And that made sense to me. That made sense to me. It's like, maybe let's break him in a little bit, in the less hostile environment, I guess. And so I understood that, but I'm really curious to see what happens there. It was a head scratcher for some. It certainly was an eyebrow raiser for all. And it'll be interesting to see what he brings. So you just said something when you talked about the receiver room, and I was going to save this for the end, but I think that there's going to be a hard cut there in that room. And I think there's a couple others. Where do you think Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel are going to have the most difficult time? What position group are they going to have the most difficult time trimming down to get to their 53? I feel like one definitely has to be the receiver.
Yeah, I think it is. And I'll pass on that because we just discussed it pretty well at length there, because there's been some UDFAs that have shown well. Tariq Black has had a good camp as well. Erica Zukama's getting back in the mix, making some plays. So it's going to be a tough decision there. But the other day, going back to KFC once again, he told me, hey, pick 10 DBs to make the team. And I'm like, okay, no problem. And then I tried it and I was like, oh shit. Yeah. How do you do that? Because there's so many guys that we don't maybe know about them yet, but they're recent draft picks or they're guys that fit particular roles. And it's really tough to trim down to who the 9th, 10th, 11th guy might be in the defensive backfield, because like Dante Trader and Patrick McMorris are two guys that I'm very intrigued by as players that are I think can do multiple things at a safety spot, but also maybe kind of do the same things well. So do you have to pick one or the other? Can you keep both of those guys? So maybe I'll just say safety, because between Minka and Iffy, those I think will be like starters pretty much from the jump. Elijah Campbell's had a good camp. He's a special team core guy that, can do a little bit of defense as well. So we'll see what his role winds up being. And then between those two players, Trader and McMorris, if Ashton Davis were healthy, like all of a sudden you've got 6-7 guys back there to choose from, and you can't keep that many. So I'll say safety, but I think it's a good thing because I think there's going to be plenty of sub packages where they do get 3 and 4 safeties out there.
It's all a good thing, right? We're not saying that we can't find enough guys. It's like, what are the hard cuts? What about the running back room?
I can't cut any of the 4 right now. They've all been so good in camp.
Right.
And if you haven't been great in camp, I still like Jalen Wright. I don't think has had the same camp as like Alexander Madison or even Ollie Gordon, but I that's a guy they traded up for to go get. And I think there's a lot of talent there.
You can't give up on that guy.
You're not going to give up on him.
And you can't tell me that Cam Smith is still on this roster and you're going to give up on Jalen Wright in year 2. Like you can't. I'm sorry. I'm unwilling to accept that.
There are other names too, Big Seth, that we got to.
And maybe he caught a stray there, but I'm like, if you've given him enough runway and still waiting, and he might be getting close to the end of it.
With Jalen, let's just wait until we see games, because running back, it's always one of those positions where it has to be in games. Even in the preseason, I think it's the position where you can see the most in a preseason game is running back. And I think that Jalen, once we get the pads on and get going, I think he'll look like we thought he would.
Yeah, I think it's always important because you talked about Quinn Ewers going against a certain group. You also got, you look at Jalen Wright, he's probably going against a pretty good group. And where, Ollie Gordon and Madison, they're probably, going against less group. But, sometimes you got to sit there and figure out, are these guys doing it against lesser competition, or are they doing it because they're going to be that good? And that's always one thing that I always had to, to look at when I was playing. So I love when Troy Vincent and J.B. Brown, those guys stepped up against me. But I also loved when I was a veteran when Sam Madison and, Pat Surtain stepped up to me. So, yeah, I think that no matter what, going into this game, we're going to see a lot. I know you're going to see a lot more in these joint practices, and I can't wait to hear how we go against 1v1, 2v2s, whatever it might be. And hopefully, we go 2v1s and things like that to give our guys a look at, a quality number 1 group in the NFL, especially for some of these young guys. But going into this game coming up, what do you expect out of some of these guys? We've talked about some of the guys that we think could be really good. I know we're not going to get a look from some of our veteran guys, but some of these young guys, who are you excited to see, no matter who they're playing against out there against Chicago Bears this weekend?
Yeah, I just to kind of, I guess, a jumping off point to assume we see the same thing we've seen the last 3 years where it's like 35 inactives or whatever it is,
right?
Tua and Tyreek and the guys with their sunflower seeds on the sideline and all that. In that case, I'm curious to see how some of the critical positions could play out in terms of like backup positions that you're going to have to rely on at some point, right? Like the swing tackle position, Larry Borum
ask you about the O-line,
or Keon Smith. Like those are 2 guys I kind of have circled. And Akawa here, Seth, like when Coach talked about Larry Borum the other day, he was like, we watched him on tape and we thought there was more to unlock from his game in our system. And that's exactly what Travis said back on the film review back in March when he signed. I thought there was more to his game.
Just in case you're keeping track, Juice, okay?
Yeah, put that one on the win column for the old Wingfield there. But I just think that they're going to you have to find a third tackle. He's going to play at some point. That's how this league works. And right now, I'm not sure that the masses know. Maybe the Dolphins do more than we do, but right now it's kind of an unknown. So how those guys hold up and, it's 3rd and 8 and they get a good pass rush or send a blitz at us or something. Can they hold up against that and find a way to get, Zach and Quinn protected in the game on Sunday? On the other side of the ball, I think it goes back to that cornerback position because, who kind of rises to the top between Ethan Bonner. I kind of feel like Storm is starting to graduate towards like above that question a little bit. He's obviously got to prove it more on the field, but
they think he has.
That's what I'm saying. Like I would include him in here, but the last couple of weeks it's like, okay, he looks like he's going to be playing a lot and he deserves it. But with Ethan Bonner, you mentioned Cam Smith, with like guys like Isaiah Johnson, who of these guys can kind of put their foot forward and at least be like, a 4th corner or whatever it might be, a guy that can contribute on special teams and play defense, because this Bears receiver group is pretty deep. I want to see who can go up there and have a good game against a good receiver group of the Chicago Bears. So probably cornerback at the tackle position on the offensive line. And then, like you guys mentioned earlier, the 2 quarterbacks. I just want to see how it looks in games because they've had good practices and good camps, and it changes once the games, get live.
Big time when the lights come on. It changes a lot. Yeah,
man,
absolutely.
I'm going to tell you this. Young guys, Big Seth, we talk about this. Man, I'm nervous as hell right now. When I was a rookie, a young guy in this game, man. You know what I mean? Like trying to go out there and prove myself in that first preseason game. And not only that, man, the real proving yourself comes up in these joint practices, man. And that's where the big evaluation would go. Because, obviously our ones will go against the ones that we talked about before. So I'm excited to see how these guys react because I know for a fact that they're nervous as hell right now, Travis.
I was thinking about this when I was leaving the hotel today. So the hotel that we're at, I won't tell you guys where it is exactly, but the hallways, the hallways that you go to the elevator, you wrap around like 4 or 5 times. I've never seen that before. It must be an old building, I'm guessing. I don't know why that's the case. And I was thinking to myself,
giving up too much detail, Travis. People can all right, which ones have all the?
We'll be gone by the time this podcast comes out, hopefully. So there you go. But
I don't think so.
It's like I was thinking to myself, like, you're walking through this hallway on a Sunday morning going down to the bus, and it's like, I'm going to be playing in Soldier Field today. Like, I just like had that thought about how nervous I would be. I don't got to do it, but I'm with you, Juice. Like, man, I get butterflies getting ready for freaking radio. I can't imagine how these guys do it, man. It's a lot to deal with.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's got to be a big deal for them. Well, speaking of game days and getting nervous, it's going to be different for the 3 of us this year. So I'm going to miss sitting next to you in the press box and all of our banter and the 200 Mountain Dews I have during those games, and then Travis eating all the finger food that they have there.
All of it. You eat all of it,
fried,
Travis?
Anything fried that can be served with a kid's meal, Juice.
He can get away with it. He can get away with it right now.
He's crushing it during. That's true.
Who am I going to hit when they make a play? Remember I just push you or run you over with my chair?
I don't know. I wonder who gets. I'll be curious to see who sits there. Are they going to slide Soffit down? Or are you going to be next to?
That's my hope. That's my guy.
I'll be curious to see. And then the post game, right? We won't be able to do that. So our text thread is going to heat up. I think it's already catching fire. But we're excited to hear everything that you're going to publish. Obviously, we're consistently on. I get the drive time alerts. It's one of my favorite parts of the day. HQ. Are we going to have HQ again this year? Are we running it back with Dolphins HQ?
Yeah, I am putting in a request for an interview for the first episode that I'm very excited about. Not going to tell you who it is just yet because I got to make sure it gets approved. But I'm August 28th on YouTube, and then August 30th on CBS is the first episode of season 2.
Sweet. So season 2 of Dolphins HQ, and then the post game show. Juice, you'll be able to listen driving home from the games.
My goodness, I'm excited.
Can't wait to see.
Well, we're gonna work the preseason together, I believe. But yeah, after
you guys are a post game or pregame?
Yeah, they got me. I'm gonna do a couple games.
Wow! Look at that! Breaking news! Breaking news here. So a lot of exciting stuff. Can't wait to hear what it all sounds like. But just excited for all of it, and excited to hear Travis excited, Juice. I think that's the best part of it.
For sure, man. Travis, man, thanks for diving in, bro.
Appreciate you guys. Happy to do it anytime.